Hey, Jason, welcome to Masters of MEDDICC. It is awesome to have you on the show. For those of you who don't know who you are, maybe we could start by you introducing yourself and how you got into this wonderful world of sales of ours.
Oh, well, I mean, I already feel embarrassed that I'm on a Masters of MEDDICC thing because it's almost, you already feel on a pedestal, which is definitely not the case. But I'm delighted to be here and to work, to talk with someone so passionate about sales methodologies and sales and go-to-market execution. I'm really excited about the conversation. So thanks for inviting me.
Pleasure.
In terms of how I got into sales, it depends if you classify recruitment as sales. And if you do, the way I got into it was, my dad said to me at the end of university, he said, right, you can't go on a gap year unless you've secured a job. Okay. And I was like, okay, fair enough. So I went, I graduated in 2009 when the financial crisis hit. So getting a job wasn't as easy as I thought it might be. So I went around all of the, graduate programs and all of that. And, I ended up interviewing at Ernst & Young and KPMG and Deloitte. And an accountant is the last thing that I am. But I needed to get the box, right? I want to go travel. So I walked in there and I ended up getting only 25% on the accountancy exam. And they would never hire anybody that gets 25% on the accountancy exam. So they invited me back in, though, because they were intrigued. Well, only one of them invited me back in, and that was Ernst & Young. I said, Jason, we really liked you in the interview, but we were really surprised that you didn't do so well on the test. So we just want to have a conversation with you to see what's going on. And I said to them, I said, well, you know what? I bet that you have lots of people in this business that can do the numbers extremely well. And I bet there's no shortage of those in Ernst & Young. And I'm sure you have people in the 80% and above that do this all the time, no problem at all. But I bet the thing you don't have are people that can understand how to interpret those numbers and create stories that convince customers how to change and what they need to do in order to improve their businesses, in order to make a difference where it matters. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where I could be helpful, because I might not have the aptitude around the accounting and the financials, but that's only half the battle. I'm sure you don't win customers by just producing perfect audit results. Right. I'm sure you win them by being a brilliant engagement person. And they went, okay. And they gave me the job based on that pitch. And I said, fabulous. And I called them back and I said, oh, one catch. I have to defer entry for a year because I want to go travel. And they went, okay. They reluctantly agreed. So anyway, I'm getting to your question, but I just thought this backstory would be curious. Yeah. I went away to Nepal and I lived there for a year, traveling and stuff and having a good time. And the day I got back, I called up Ernst & Young 3 weeks before I was due to start. And I said, I'm really sorry. You've got the wrong guy. I really appreciated you deferring entry, but I'm not an accountant and I don't want to join Ernst & Young. And they were like, so I ticked my dad's box of the criteria, but I never wanted to be an accountant, and my sales pitch was just to get the job. Right. And instead I joined a recruitment business. And that was how I fell into getting on the phone.
I love it. I that's brilliant. So can you actually, because in our world, a lot of people in those shoes would have put on their, on their LinkedIn profile, E&Y alumni, because, I know you didn't start, but you could have put it on there, that's okay.
No,
and then
yeah, I'm more proud of the fact that I didn't go and do something that I didn't think was right for me. And I could have had an Ernst & Young graduate program contract, or I could have had what was an £18,000 base salary in a recruitment firm in London, where I felt like I could go and make something happen.
Yeah, I love that. I think our industry is starting to catch on to this now. I've seen a lot of things this year in particular to support this, but for me, for a long time, my secret, pun not intended, recruitment channel was recruiters. If I look back to some of my greatest ever hires, I think if I think about all, like at least 90% of them, the ones that make it into the top 10 of my greatest hires were at some point recruiters, probably the start of what we would call their sales career. And yeah, and I think people are starting to catch on to this now, but you're a great example of that with the career you've had. And how long were you doing recruitment for?
So I did it for 11 months. And I think it was lucky that, good timing, whatever, where a person I worked on the desk with left and joined Gartner, about 6 months in. And, it's Valerie, Fokker. She works at Fox, and, she's had an amazing career in, software sales. But she, sent me a Facebook message. She didn't want to do it on LinkedIn because she, was worried about it getting caught, because recruiters spend all their time on LinkedIn. And I didn't see it for a few months. But she basically sent me a message saying, hey, I heard you on the phone. You were really good on the phone. Why don't you come to Gartner and learn the fundamentals of sales? And I got this Facebook message months later, and I went, whoa, that's amazing. Could be amazing. So I emailed her, Facebook messaged her back, and she referred me into Gartner, to go and have, an interview. And that's how I got in and out of it.
Right. And that's a great place to start officially starting your sales career. I know, we've talked about recruitment having, direct parallels there, but that's a great place to start. How did that go? How did you find it? Was there a learning curve, or did you find it a natural process? What was it like?
It was a huge learning curve. Because I think I was like, I had loads of confidence, but very little, competence at the time, right? So I was like, really had huge self-belief, but didn't really know what I was doing, and had very little idea about technology. So, the learning curve was the first 6 months I didn't sell anything. So I joined in August. I didn't sell anything for the remainder of the financial year, and the financial year reset at the start of the calendar year. I started to make progress there. And then in that year, I did manage to do, what they call an Eagle Award, which is like top 1% of people. And I did that every single year that I was there then. And I don't know why it necessarily clicked. Maybe we could discuss it, but, first 6 months, nothing. And then it clicked. And then it was sort of high achievement thereafter.
Interesting. And it's this thing about clicking. I don't know about you or, people listening along, but for me, I always felt like I was, whether I was an individual contributor or whether I was a leader, I was always waiting for it to click. Like that was always the thing I thought that would happen, that I would just wake up one day and go, yep, we're in the groove now. And even when the performances were there and things were sort of running well, that the definition of what the click would be always seemed to sort of move further away, or like it seemed like it was always equidistant away. And that was always something that I never really felt comfortable with, even if I could have defined a year previous, what would it clicking look like? A year later, if I'd hit that exact criteria, I would not feel like it had clicked. So when you say it clicked, if I had asked you at the moment, and Gartner, has it clicked, where you were, top 1% performer, would you have felt like that, or would you have felt that you still had a lot more to do?
So at the time, when I would have recognized at the time that it was clicking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think yes, because, I was, with each, small success, confidence builds and swagger builds, and that then starts to build up what they call flow, right? And when you're in your flow, more success starts to come. And as long as you remain, consciously competent of the things that you're doing well every day that are driving that success, then you shouldn't fall off, right? The risk is, if you're not conscious of what it is that you're doing, it will probably just be fluke, or it might end up doing this, where you'll get some good success for a while, but it won't remain consistent. So the secret, as I teach people here in my new role, is to make sure they're working out what it is that's happening, that's making it work. Because if they don't cement it as learning, then they're not going to be able to replicate it and continue it.
I love that. And that's awesome. And I think one of the things that we always see in our industry of sales, which is, I always say, is like a performance industry, just like a sport, is that when you are performing, and in our world, that's, closing deals, then you carry this confidence with you, which therefore leads to you closing more And I think that the reason for that is, one of the elements to that is that if you are performing, you carry a confidence, and then that confidence emanates to the customers who think, wow, this person selling this product really believes in it. They're almost assuming I'm going to buy from them. So it must be great because you have such confidence that I'm going to buy it. And that is, I think, one aspect. But there's this lovely quotes, and I'm not going to get it right, but it's from Sir Alex Ferguson, probably one of the greatest sports coaches of all time. He talks about strikers in football, and he says that when they are scoring and they're on form, they think they're never going to stop scoring. And then by contrast, when they're not scoring, they think they'll never score again. And I think like what you're talking about there is brilliant, because you're talking about taking that, let's carry on the analogy, the footballer that's scoring, and then figuring out what is it about their game that's making them score, and really identifying that and making them aware of it so they can continue to do those things and not get into that rut, which I think we've all had in our career, where we've been high performer, fall into a rut. And sometimes what we need to get out of that rut is just to do the things we were doing before.
I 100% agree. So it's even like, I think in basketball, they call it hot hand, like where they feel like they won't stop scoring. Or even to the contrary, gamblers have it where they think they won't stop losing, or they won't stop winning if they're on a run. The thing about those examples is what the gambler doesn't realize is every bet is based on luck. So the next bet has no correlation to the last bet, right? And it's the same in shooting a goal. There's no correlation between the last score and the next score, unless you consciously understand what it is from a skill perspective that's equaling that win or that positive result. So it's the same true in our performance sport and in sales. If you close a deal and it all goes perfectly well, or you didn't work out what happened, or the process you followed was just based on gut feel, you might feel that the next deal is going to happen just the same way, but it could equally happen the exact opposite way.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. And so when you're working with your team to kind of like nail these things down, to sort of identify them, and kind of you almost want to build them into your sort of your cadence, your rhythm as a salesperson of doing these things, which become best practice, I suppose. How do you identify those for your team?
So it's actually a huge topic of our leadership team right now, because obviously we're ramping a lot of new people into our business, and we're doing it remotely. We have a responsibility to these people to make sure that they get better and they become great. And they came here most of the time to learn and to get better. So we have to hold up our end of the bargain, right? And we have to deliver on that. So the leadership's question then is, well, how do we do that? How do we make sure that that actually happens in practice at all levels of leadership? So we put a huge amount of thought into it, from the onboarding of somebody to their first 30 days. We have leading indicators about management involvement in certain elements of their process. We have best practice around prep meetings and debrief meetings, which meetings that leadership should attend, champions that leadership should own, difficult conversations that should be fronted by leadership versus the RSM. All of these elements that make sure that we're leading from the front and teaching and showing, so that we can cement learning with that individual, and then almost go through the process, which can be a bit awkward, of like, hey, did you see what I did in that meeting? Can you just talk me through what you observed? Did you notice the way that I handled that objection? And what did you see that you thought was interesting? Because we're trying to make sure that they are conscious of the things that they can see, so that they can then know that that's what mattered in that meeting, versus, oh, that was a great meeting. I'm not sure what you did there. It was magic. Versus, I can see exactly what you did there wasn't magic. It was just applying a formula that works and doing it every time.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And it's so much, people who listen to this podcast will know I do this a lot, but I relate our industry of sales so much to sport. And if you think about what you're talking about there, you're basically reviewing the tape, which we get to do much better nowadays in the remote world with technologies that can support, recording meetings and playing things back, and obviously live coaching in them, which is really, really cool. But that's effectively what you're talking about doing there. You in almost like a role of a coach, you're playing back the game video match video, and you're pointing out things, and that is if you think about the outcomes that can come from that, the positive outcomes that can come from that, that is brilliant, not just for the individual that you're coaching. And this, I think, comes back to having that kind of open collaborative culture, but the idea of, elevating someone that's done something really, really good in a meeting and then sharing it with the team, not only because it elevates their, them for doing something good and shines positive light on them, but also the rest of the team benefits from it as well. So I think that's like, and I love what you said there about, you almost sort of feel like with these people that you've brought in, who are very high potential. I imagine, looking at the kind of caliber of people I see you're hiring, very high potential people, and you're kind of committing to delivering on your promise to them.
Yes.
That's really cool, man. I really, really like that.
And we are, and just for the record, we are held to really high accountability on that. The default is, if we hired them and they fulfilled our hiring criteria, then, and they're not successful, either we didn't do a very good job assessing the hiring criteria, which shouldn't happen with all of the layers of assessment, or the leadership hasn't done its job in upskilling that person because they came here for the right reasons. We thought they had all the right DNA. It was validated by several layers of leadership. So the only thing that could have gone wrong is we didn't invest the right attention in making them better. And now the time lag is starting to create a will issue, because they were like, high will, not learning, not having success, will is dropping, now starting to feel a bit disillusioned. And that's a very hard place then to pick someone up and resell them on the opportunity and get them recommitted to something when the will is so much lower.
Yeah. And something that I've always noticed, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is for me, the very, very best salespeople I've ever worked with, the most elite salespeople, are always the very, very first to put their hands up to say when they need help, or when they are looking at a bad quarter, or they've got a deal that they think that they're going to qualify out of. They are always the very, very first to say that. And the if you think by contrast to those that don't feel comfortable to do that, in the scenario you talked about there, where someone starts to not perform as you want them to, they're not hitting the numbers you want them to. If they're not the first person that can feel that they can put their hand up straight away and say, hey, like, I don't see this. I don't see myself hitting the numbers I need to hit. I don't see myself delivering the performance I know I'm capable, what you hired me to do. Like, that is a culture and a scenario where you're going to solve that issue much, much quicker with that person, as you just said, by the process you go through, a very thorough hiring process, very experienced process. And so that is an interesting thing for me, is like, how do we get people who are maybe less experienced in their career in sales terms to have the attitude of those most elite salespeople who are the very, very first to put their hands up to say they need help. They're the ones that, in theory, should need the least help because they're the most experienced, high talent, but they are the most comfortable putting their hands up. How do we bridge that gap where those who are less experienced but high potential can feel like they can just put their hands up and be vulnerable?
Well, I mean, maybe a contrarian point of view there is, I actually find that, so one of the hiring traits we look at is coachability in like lots of great companies do. And I find that the often younger, often less experienced, often more high potential people are the most open to change. Right. They're the most open to go and say, I am a blank canvas. I want to be just like you because I idolize what you have become and I want to do exactly that. And I believe in it. And I believe in you. Teach me everything you know. And I'm not going to come in with any bad habits, any preconceived ideas about me knowing best, no ego, because I'm here to learn. Those people actually end up having a much steeper learning curve and progression, because of that just mad coachability that they have. Versus, to the contrary, is some of the more experienced people go, well, I think I know what I'm doing. And maybe I have got a series of bad habits, good habits, mixture of the two. Maybe I do have a bit of an ego. Maybe I quite rightly have a bit of swagger because I've got a track record of success. So you're going to have to do a much better job convincing me that what you have to say is worthy of my attention and my time. So the learning curve can be a bit more like this, or like, oh, take that on board. I won't take that on board. I won't take that on board. I won't take that on board.
I love that.
So it's a bit different sometimes, I find.
But the really cool thing about what you just identified there is it's actually probably not relative to the experience level. It's relative to the attribute of how coachable the person is. And so you
Yes.
can, if you maintain that coachability, if that's just your personality, and it's not a trait that's related to the level of experience you have. So, for example, if I am a salesperson early in my career, and I'm talking to you as someone that's got a very very strong track record at great companies, then I'm going to be naturally looking up to you. But whether I have and therefore I'm super coachable in your eyes, but am I coachable to my peer who is 6 months ahead of me, a year ahead of me? And that I think is a linear process that may actually continue on through, because that's almost like a real deeply grained coachability. So if I therefore become that 2-3 decade experience of top level sales experience, and am I still coachable, or does it reduce off a little bit because I see everyone else around me, and I think that I've learned what they have to offer me.
I actually like what you've done there. You're decoupling the two consistently up regardless of experience. But so I find that sometimes experience makes this less. As experience goes up, coachability becomes less. I think so. You're saying that it's so important, therefore, to keep coachability as high as possible and remain very conscious of that, no matter what level you're at, because otherwise, what will happen is you'll just keep doing this all the way to the bottom, where you feel like I know everything because I'm experienced, but I'm not open to learning. So this goes to the bottom and this goes to the top.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to draw a parallel with sports people. And if you look at the top sports people, the ones that are sort of famous, the ones that are famous for kind of, their ethic, their work ethic, they are the ones that their coaches would say are the ones that stay late after training, that carry on. You look at David Beckham, probably in his prime, the best free kick taker in the world. But he was probably the person that was taking the most practice free kicks in the world as well. And he probably.
I heard I watched some videos of Kobe Bryant and Ronaldo, and Kobe Bryant is an excellent example of that, right? So I heard that famous story that, I don't know, one of his peers said, right, I'm going to be the first at practice. And in order for him to be first at practice, he needed to be down at breakfast by X time or whatever. And by the time he got to breakfast, he saw Kobe there, and he thought to himself, oh, great, I'm there with Kobe. He's there too. But then he recognized that Kobe was sweating. And he thought, oh, he's already worked out. And now and that just made him, blew his mind, because he was like, the best player in the world. I thought I was getting up extra early, but he's already trained.
Yeah.
And that just reset his expectation on what greatness is really all about and what's required.
I love that. That's such a. Can you imagine that being that, yes, I'm going to be first there, and you get downstairs and Kobe's there, and you're like, well, at least I'm only second to Kobe, and then you realize he's already done a workout.
Or like Ronaldo, I heard he always then after practice used to go to there was 4 football pitches to the side, and he had to go up and down each one and do this drill all across all 4 pitches. And you have this and I think it's this is a really interesting point, because take me, I'm going through a bit of it myself actually. So I took on this new role of second line leadership at the start of the new fiscal year, which was August. And I think I fell into unconscious incompetence in the new role, where I came off the back of such a great first line management career, where I thought, well, I know what I'm doing as a first line, and all I've got to do is teach other people to do it. So I know that job so well. So surely I'm going to be able to teach people to do it, because I've just done it so successfully. Logic sort of adds up. Fine. But what it's turned out to be such a different type of job, in terms of, it's way more looking at themes and metrics and data points that are more indications of where problems might be, creating enablement around those that are much more broader and scalable, thinking about how people are feeling as a culture, all this sort of stuff that really wasn't relevant when you were so deal orientated as a first line manager. And I've gone through a few light bulb moments only in the last month or two, where I thought, actually, I'm now realizing that I was unconsciously incompetent in my new role. And I was almost the person with experience and not being coachable. but some poor, experiences have led me to believe that, like this needs to dial up again. And it gives you a really stark reminder that, oh, you haven't got it figured out. That, and mistakes or problems are really good, reminders of that. You know what I mean?
I do, and I think that's actually something that's really interesting. That I think when I look at your career, and I listening to some of the things you've spoken about before, I think there's a correlation here. I might be making it loosely, and I'd love to hear if you think I'm onto something here. But you stepping into the role you mentioned, it's almost like you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. And so that gap between what you had to sort of step up to achieve because you weren't aware of it, you couldn't be coachable on it. There's that you can't be coachable for what you don't know. And so you step in, and actually you it's interesting that you almost saw it as you being, you sort of took that in the way you described it, or how I heard it was you were saying, I perhaps went into this role not being coachable, but actually the fact that you reflected and quickly realized that there was a gap, and then you've kind of set your expectations of yourself higher, and now obviously you're working on meeting those expectations, is actually a coachable trait. The uncoachable trait in that scenario would have been to go in and not see the gaps and not see the opportunity for you to sort of learn more, because you're being exposed to new things that you hadn't been exposed to in your previous role. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that points back to something that really stood out for me, which was that where you were saying, you're a top performer at a great company like Gartner, you said the top 1%. I think at one point you might have even been top globally as well.
Yeah.
Why on earth, to throw a big question out there, why on earth would you not be one of these people that stays at Gartner for their entire career?
Well, I think it's like, so I've spoken about this before, but I think it's like, take it to a deeper level. Have you ever been in environments where you don't, I mean, this might sound kind of rude, but, and it is kind of rude, but I don't mean any disrespect to Gartner. They're an amazing company, but I just felt like whenever I looked around, there wasn't somebody there that I really admired and wanted to be like so much. So when you're faced with that, the prospect of growing up in that company is almost, it can't happen, because no matter who you meet at any level, you're like, I don't see myself being like you, or wanting to desire to be like you. Or if I'm in your shoes talking to someone like me 20 years on, and I'm having the conversation that you're having with me, I don't think I'll feel very fulfilled. And that like creates this like irks you, and it makes you feel like I've got to leave. I've got to get out of here. It's like this like urgency that I've got to, when situations that like that fight or flight, or that something that's wrong in your life that you run from, it becomes quite immediate and quite urgent. That you're like, right, I've made my decision, and now all of the process that is left is to act on that decision. You've already decided that you need to go. So all that happens now is how much urgency you can apply to leaving.
Right.
And that's what I did.
Yeah. And I think what, again, if I can sort of take it like an abstract view of what you're talking about there is, you met it yourself. You kind of came in to Gartner, and it was a steep learning curve. So it wasn't like you'd sort of landed as this person that kind of already knew what you were doing in that context. You've kind of leveled up, and you've kind of realized your and this is something I don't think we talk about in our industry enough, but you were peaking on your own potential that you could reach inside of Gartner. And I think in sales in particular, we constantly compare ourselves to others around us, which is okay. I'm not knocking that as something to do. We compare ourselves as an AE to another AE in our team, or to another AE in our network, or in another region. And we draw like parallels between ourselves and our performance and where we are compared to other people. And we may look at peers we used to work with, maybe at the start of your career, and where they are, and you compare yourself, and that will make you feel like whether you're meeting your potential or not, which is fine to some degree. But I also think something we don't talk about enough is how we have an innate understanding of what our own potential is. And what we should be measuring ourselves against is whether we're meeting our full potential. And I describe this as being like something that I felt before, actually, funnily enough, not to sort of make it about MEDDICC, but before I learned MEDDICC, I would always describe myself as being like a B player version of myself. Forget about anyone else. I was just like B player. And I wasn't, it was like, to use another sports analogy, it was like I could use my left foot as well, but I was only using my right foot. And then somebody told me I can use my left foot, and all of a sudden it ups my game. And I think that, sometimes what I see, and it's in particular in like very high potential people, high talented people in our industry, they just can't settle. And, that's why people carry on climbing. It's a well-known fact in our industry, the people, the sales leaders aren't necessarily the most highest paid, and quite often contrary to that, it's not a role that people take to often increase their earnings. And so often what I see is people follow up on, going into more senior roles, whether that be senior AE, enterprise AE, etc., or going into leadership, because you're constantly striving to meet your own potential. And what you described there in Gartner sounded to me exactly like you were like, there's like this glass ceiling you were hitting inside of Gartner where you could see the full potential of yourself, but you couldn't get past it inside of Gartner. So if that was, first off, like I said a lot there, but does that like resonate? And if so, like, how do you take that kind of feeling and do a positive with it?
Well, very interesting, and I think that's I really enjoyed hearing that out. Actually, I think it's funny you say it's funny you talk about achieving your full potential, because someone once asked me recently, what is your sense of purpose, or like what makes you motivated? And I said a number of things, but one of the things I said was this almost uncomfortable desire to achieve my full potential. And it was because, like, have you ever felt like it's a funny thing. My partner, Lucy, she when she chose me to be her husband, or to partner with me in her life, she always told me that she thought I could achieve anything I wanted to do. She was like a cheerleader sort of person. And achieving my full potential is not only about me, it's kind of like for her as well. It's like a weird thing that if I chicken out or I don't do it, I'm kind of negging on the promise that she thought was always there for us and for me.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I'm falling short of expectations. And that really bothers me, to fall short of someone's expectations of me. And it's like a very uncomfortable feeling, like to fall short of what you thought I could be.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Like I thought you could be X, but because you didn't have the character or the intelligence or the coachability or the drive or the sense of purpose or the discipline, you fell short. And that's a horrible feeling to have recognized, isn't it?
Yeah. I think what it sounds like you're saying there is like, Lucy's like your accountability partner. I mean, she's obviously much more than that, but she's your accountability partner. She becomes an outlet for you to make it more than just your own accountability to yourself, which therefore, subconsciously or consciously drives you forward more towards your goal, which is always meeting your potential. You always want to meet your potential, because otherwise, you talked about it, how you described your situation in Gartner. It was like this horrible weight on your shoulders where you felt like you basically, probably, I'm putting words in your mouth now, but because I can relate, you feel like you're not meeting your full potential. And you owe that to yourself, because that's just how you're wired. You can't help that. You can't stop that. You can't, train yourself out of that, because you're always aiming for that next thing. And so what Lucy becomes is your accountability partner in that just makes it a little bit more like a team towards a goal, which is a great thing to have. That's almost like a big part of the partnership.
I agree with you. Two things on that. It doesn't limit itself actually to professional stuff. It actually, if you have an accountability partner, they should be testing you on becoming the best person that you could possibly be. And they call you out on when they feel like you're not meeting that bar of expectation with you or with them. And that makes you continually evolve and live in a culture with your relationship with somebody of constant improvement and evolvement as you as people, as parents, as individuals, as financial planners, as professionals, as whatever it is, husbands, wives, role models. You continually evaluate your own potential in all of those areas. And it's why I think I can now start to relate with people that, like, not, it might sound funny, and I don't mean it how it comes across, but let's see someone's at the Oscars and they're like saying, you always hear the same speech. I would like to thank my partner for everything that they've done. Now, that always to me used to sound cliched, that they're simply thanking them because, well, you've got to thank them. But it's actually because that person probably held them to account on everything that they achieved in their life. And that person had such a motivation or a sense of purpose that was attached to that person feeling good about them and their expectations that they're achieving their full potential in their eyes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that is it. And it's that, yeah, it's that, I think people listening to this will resonate, whether it's their, a common one is obviously a partner, in terms of a relationship, but also parents as well, accountability partners, because they are probably your first cheerleaders in many cases.
Yes.
People that are kind of see your full potential, and maybe even more. If I think about my mum, like almost a catchphrase with my mum is that I've missed my vocation in life, and I could be doing anything. I could be like, giving one of my kids a really bad haircut in lockdown, and my mum would say and goes, "Oh, it's brilliant! You've missed your vocation in life. You should have been a barber." And of course, so that's something there, and that's interesting. So what did you do? You were a gardener. You were crushing it, but you knew you could take yourself further. So what did you do? How did you fix that situation?
So I think I've been blessed with like good, some good fortune and some good like things that happened. For example, like what happened was, I got introduced to Steve McCluskey at Dynamics, and it was the first meeting that I'd had once I'd made the decision to leave a gardener. So that's a pretty great meeting to get right in a pretty great company of excellence. So that's a bit of good fortune because I didn't go and create an amazing plan and create a load of list of companies. And I just, got the good fortune of meeting someone exceptional. And to paint the contrast of, you asked me why I wanted to leave. Well, it was because of the admiration and looking at people that I didn't necessarily want to be. As soon as I met Steve, he made me feel uncomfortable.
Love it.
And he made me feel out of my depth and a bit of a fraud and a bit of like, he could see through me. I arrived in a really sharp suit as if I'd made it. I walked in very casual. I didn't even bring out a notepad. I was a bit like, let's have a conversation sort of like, peer to peer. I think he gave me like the benefit of the doubt, really. He was a bit like, oh, I've seen a lot of you types of kids, high potential, smart, got a lot of guts, but I know exactly where you're at in your development. And he didn't choose to use that opportunity to like tear me apart, but he slowly but surely helped me realize how out of my depth I was through questioning and through just cues and saying, so, I'm putting all the onus on me to control the meeting, but was being unable to do so. And him watching how I was floundering and not being able to find a route through. And he was like, okay, so you see what's happening here. You see why, the skills that you're not demonstrating and how I can help you. And I was like, oh my God. And that was another realization, like, again, the urgency. It was no longer about deciding I needed to work for Steve. That had been decided. And I didn't care about the company. I didn't care about the prospects of the business. I didn't care about how well it was doing. I didn't care about any of that. I just met an individual I thought I could learn a lot more from than I was learning today. So nothing else mattered. It was just like, don't care about it. I trust you because you're demonstrating in this moment that I could learn a hell of a lot from you. And that's the only reason I'm changing what I'm doing. So bring it on.
Do you know what's so funny and why I was smiling so much when you were telling me about that is that what Steve was implicating you in the pain of your situation and he
Yeah, yeah,
eradicated anything else. If you think about that from a sales context, which is effectively what he had done, and I'm sure if we spoke to Steve, he would probably remember, as we all do when we remember those people that we hired that went on to, to be hugely successful. I'm sure he remembers. And I think probably what he was doing at that point was selling to you. That's what he would describe. He's trying to sell you in, even though he's only still qualified. He's part of the process. He's qualifying whether you actually got the coachability, as is the case in this scenario where you probably have the raw talent but not the frameworks. And so he had probably spotted in you that you were a top performer at Gartner, and he knew why you were there. And he's making you feel like there's nothing else in this world that matters more than you getting this job, because that's the only thing that's going to help you reach your potential. And what you describe, I could feel it. I could feel it as you were talking about it, even though it was I don't know, 7-8 years ago, something like that now. You could feel the I'm sure people listening along would feel that too, like the pain you were in, right? And you're just telling the story. You know, the pain you must actually have been in that moment of seeing your potential being made or your potential there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was actually there was two things I was feeling. One was, oh my God, I can't let this slip away. Right. Oh my God. I need to convince him that I'm good enough for this job, because if the potential point, if I don't make it, if I don't feel like I can get in here, my life is over. I'm devastated. It means everything's going to fall apart. So I had that single-mindedness that I had to do everything I could to get this job. And the second thing I felt was, wow, what a contrast to the way I walked in to the way I'm walking out of this meeting. I walked in with swagger. I'm walking out with humility. Right. And I hadn't felt that sort of feeling in quite some time. And it was a good reset, like the one I just described for you in my new role. You get these resets of humbleness where you're like, oh God, I really, I didn't recognize that in myself, and I now need to choose to embrace it. It's uncomfortable. I don't like to look at it in the mirror, but I'm up for it because I have to achieve my full potential. So let's get on the road. Let's get back on the horse and start riding,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still smiling at the idea, you just describing that, and just how much you could imagine, if you could ever get your customer in the same situation, that same moment of pain that you were in about the prospect of buying your solution, then that is what drives, as you said it yourself, actually, without me even prompting, we weren't even talking in a sales context, but about urgency. You were like urgently wanting to work for AppD at that moment. And the interesting thing as well, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think AppD was the company we know it as, or what it came to be known as at that point. It was, am I right in saying it was before, it was way pre-acquisition, but even that sort of period before acquisition where